Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? So, we're going to dive right into this case. If you are from South Georgia, then you probably have heard about this case. If you're not, well, buckle up, because Buttercup, it's going to be a ride. We're going to be talking today about the Alday family murders. This is just a completely tragic case. It is just heartbreaking. So, this actually happened years ago, though. It happened back in 1973. We're going to start with, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the Aldays first. There were 6 members of that family that were murdered on May 14th of 1973. And of those people that were murdered, it was Ned Alday, Jerry Alday, Mary Alday, Jimmy Alday, Aubrey Alday, and Chester Alday. So all of them were in the same family. Just to give you a little bit of a backstory of the Aldays themselves, Ned and Ernestine Alday, they were married in 1935. They lived in Donaldsonville, Georgia. Sometimes I've seen that it's actually listed as Seminole, Georgia, but it's Donaldsonville. They had 9 kids, so they were busy. But, they ran a farm. They lived very, very simply. So you have to find entertainment, I suppose. But they had 9 children. Of those 9 children, Jerry Alday was one of their children. He was married to Mary Alday. They were married in 1970, and they lived in a trailer that was about, it was probably just a mile or 2 down the road from the farmhouse where Ned and Ernestine lived. Where their trailer was somewhat close to the farmland that the Aldays owned. So I want to believe, after doing the research, it said that there was about 400 acres of farmland that the Aldays farmed. And it was a family effort. They all worked on the farm. Well, Ned and Ernestine, they had a farmhouse where it was kind of like the main hub of the farm. That was where everybody was raised. That was where they all would congregate and have family functions. Well, Ned and Mary, they lived right down the road. So Ned, his other son, Chester was married to a lady named Barbara. They lived next door to Ned and Ernestine. Chester and Barbara lived in a little mobile home literally right beside the farmhouse. So they were all pretty close. Let's just say, within spitting range. I've done the whole living beside your parent thing. It's not for everybody, but they got along. Back then, it was a simpler time. The Aldays were known to be churchgoers, very friendly people, just neighbors that you wanted. They were always there for helping people. They were just good folks, very simple. Just, when you think of the South and you think of the farmers and stuff, it's a very hard life. They worked really hard, but they were just good people, and they were very humble, and they appreciated what they had, and they were very involved in their church. The ones that went to the church, they were also, officials and teachers and things like that. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a backstory. We're going to come back to the Aldays, but I also want to give you some information on the criminals. So we're going to talk about 3 different people to start with. Okay, we're going to start with Carl Isaacs. So we're moving from down here in South Georgia all the way up to Maryland, okay? Maryland. All right, so in Maryland, there's a guy named Carl Isaacs. He was currently in prison. He had a rough life, he was in and out of foster families and foster care. It didn't really state that he was abused or anything, but I know that it was rough. He had a really hard time in foster care, and it led him to a life of crime. He started doing carjackings and burglaries, and he was in and out of trouble constantly, but he was actually put in prison for burglary and car theft. And sadly, while he was in prison, there was a riot in the prison that he was housed in. And after that, or during that riot, Carl Isaacs was actually, he was assaulted. He was raped for 8 hours by other inmates. And, I can't imagine what he went through during that time. That was awful. But it did state that for 8 solid hours, pretty much, he was raped. And it was by fellow inmates. It was by people that he knew that, he was housed with. And so because of that, the officials of the prison or the, I don't know if it was the state that decided to do it, but they actually transferred him, and he was transferred to, excuse me, he was transferred to Poplar Hill in Maryland. And Poplar Hill was actually where he was housed when he escaped from prison and later went to the Aldays. So he didn't escape alone, though. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about his two inmates that were with him, how it went down. So that's a little bit about Carl. Well, also in Poplar Hill in Maryland at that prison was Carl's half-brother, Wayne. Wayne Coleman was pretty much kind of had the same story as far as a childhood. He was in and out of foster homes, in and out of trouble. He also had a thing for burglary and stealing cars. Like, they just, they were just little petty criminals, things like that. At this time, they had not ever murdered anybody, or, it's not recorded that they actually were involved in any horrific crimes like that, other than just burglary and car theft. Wayne was actually 26 at the time of the escape and the murders and all of that. And, Wayne, it was said that he kind of had a taste for other men. Yeah. So Wayne, I'm not sure if he was completely gay, but he liked to partake in other men. And while he was in prison up at Poplar Hill in Maryland, he actually met another inmate named George Dungee was his name. I'm going to just call him George throughout because I have a hard time pronouncing his last name and I'm not sure if it's right. So we're going to call him George. So George and Wayne had this kind of intimate-like relationship. I'm not sure if it was super well known throughout the prison, but I know that they were involved, okay? And whenever Carl was transferred to the prison that his half-brother Wayne was at, he started coming up with this idea. Carl's like, I want to escape prison. I don't want to be here. We're going to bust up out of this joint. And of course, he wanted to take his half-brother with him, and he didn't want to do it alone. So Wayne basically broke it down to him. And he's like, look, homie, it's not going to happen. Not unless I can bring my friend, homie, my compagnon, my lover. I mean, he didn't say all that, I'm sure. But you know what I'm saying. Like, he wanted to bring his lover, his friend, George, with him. So Carl, a little back history, it was back there in the 70s, segregation, and division because of race. It's the South. It was still a thing. And there was still distaste between, a lot of the white people and a lot of the black people. Sadly, like, they were still overcoming a lot of that. Well, in the process of this, Carl didn't like George, mainly because he was black. But not only did he not like George because he was black, but because of the rumors, he also realized that Wayne and George had a thing. And Wayne was a white guy. So not only was this scandalous for him to be with another man, but he was with a black man, which back then was just, oh no, it was just, you didn't do that. Whatever. Anyway, so Carl didn't like George. Carl didn't want George to come. He was like, dude, I'm not taking George. Like, why do we have to bring George? But Wayne was determined. He was like, if George isn't coming, I'm not going. And so Carl decided that he was going to have a talk with George, and he was going to try to talk him into coming. Now, let me give you a little history on good old George. So George, not the sharpest tool in the shed, y'all. Like, not the brightest crayon. He just wasn't. Bless his heart. Let me tell y'all about George. So George was not in prison for carjacking or theft or anything like that. Y'all know why George was in prison? George was in prison because he didn't pay his child support, okay? Which is still wrong. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's okay to not pay your child support, but that's why George was in prison compared to a lot of the other inmates that were in there for more dangerous, violent things. And not only was he in there for a non-violent crime, but he was about to be released, y'all. George was about to get out of prison. And so Carl comes to him and he's like, hey, me and Wayne, we busting out of this joint. You want to come with us? And I guess George just wanted to be with Wayne. I don't really understand why he decided to go partake in this plan with them because, like I said, he was almost a free man. But he decided that he was going to jump on board with him, and he did. And so Carl, George, and Wayne, they bust out of prison. They decide to come up with this plan. They get out and they hide in the woods for a little while. That prison break was on May 5th of 1973. I want to think it was like 9 days before the Alday murders. And Carl was kind of like the ringleader. And once they busted out of prison, they decided that they were going to pick up their little brother, Billy. Now, Billy Isaacs was Carl's brother. He was his full brother. And he was younger. I want to think he was like 15 or 16. He was just pretty much a kid still. But like most brothers, Billy really looked up to Carl for whatever reason, because Carl was a really crappy person, but whatever. So yeah, Carl's like, listen, I want to go get my little brother. And I'm not sure if Wayne was actually the brother of Billy, because I know that it is listed as Carl's half-brother. So I'm not really sure if they were brothers, but we're just going to call them brothers. So you got Carl, Wayne, and George. They go and pick up Billy, which is the little brother. Now, once they go to pick him up, that's when things kind of start to take a turn and the crimes begin. They need cash. They need clothing. They need a way to go. In their mind, they thought, we're fixing to load up and we're going to Mexico. So that way we can be free men. We don't have to worry about anybody trying to lock us up in the U.S. And, after they ended up picking up Billy, they went and started breaking into some houses, stole some money, it said they stole some booze. They'd been in prison a while. They wanted to get some drinks or whatever. But they ended up finding all this stuff, and they came across a vehicle that they wanted to steal. And once getting in the vehicle and going to hijack it, they noticed that they had been spotted. The neighbor had actually witnessed them stealing the car. And the guy's name was Richard Miller, I do believe was his name. So Richard Miller decided that he was going to be the hero, and he got in his vehicle and he decided to chase them down. Somewhere along this road of him chasing them realizing he was approaching them, they managed to stop somehow and kidnap Richard. They took Richard down a logging road and they executed him. They murdered him and left his body there. So once they got done murdering him, they decided to take Richard's car. So they took Richard's car and they were headed down south. Now, before reaching Florida, they realized that they needed gas. And at this time, they didn't want to stop at, I guess, a big gas station or anything like that. So they were trying to stay under the radar. In that process, Carl sees what he thinks is a gas tank on a farm beside a mobile home. That mobile home was Jerry and Mary's mobile home that he spotted. Well, once they got to the gas tank, they realized that it was diesel fuel. It was actually listed that it was either diesel fuel or they couldn't get into the gas tank because it was locked. So I'm guessing it was diesel. They needed gasoline, but they were already at the mobile home. So they're like, hey, we're here. Let's go ahead and see what's inside that we can take. Maybe we could, salvage some stuff. So while they're in there ransacking Jerry and Mary's mobile home, on the other side of the farm, a couple miles away, Miss Ernestine, which is Ned's wife, the matriarch of the family, she is cooking lunch, and she has lunch spread out for the family. All the Alday guys are there. They're taking a break from their working day to go eat lunch. They're sitting around the table just talking about what their plans are for that day. And they each go separate ways and they decide what they're going to do. And Ned and Jerry hop in the vehicle together. They go to plow a field. You have Chester. He ends up going with his uncle Aubrey, which is also in Alday. They go to another section. And then you have Jimmy, which is another one of the sons of Ned and Ernestine. And he ends up going as well to somewhere else to plow a field or something. In that process, so Ned and Jerry decide at some point in time during that afternoon that they're going to go to Jerry's house. I'm not sure if they were going there to pick up, fuel or what they were doing, but they show up at Jerry's house and they do not realize that the house is being ransacked by these four people. They end up going, I guess they were trying to get inside the house. Once they got inside the house or got to the door, they were met at gunpoint. You know, Carl met them with a gun in their face with a pistol, and he made them come into the trailer. He forced them to empty their pockets out, and once they did, Jerry and Ned were taken to opposite sides of the house. So on one end, which we're going to call the north end, is where Ned was taken. Then on the other end, which we're going to say the south end, that's where Jerry was taken. Well, Carl ends up going with Jerry, and then you have Wayne that ends up going with Ned. And Carl and Jerry are back here in this other room, and Carl's, you know, telling Jerry basically, I'm fixing to shoot you, I'm going to kill you. And Jerry's like, listen, we're farmers. We don't have anything of value to you. If I had it, I'd give it to you. He's like, listen, please, my wife's going to be home soon. Just take whatever you want, but just leave. You know, please don't hurt her. She has nothing of value as well. Like, we're just farmers. We don't have material things to give you. As soon as Jerry got done saying that, he knew that he had messed up. He had messed up bad, because he saw the look in Carl's face, and Carl realized that there was a lady coming. Now, this guy's been in prison for a while. He's gone through a lot in prison, and he hasn't had a chance to have the company of a lady. So obviously his wheels are turning, and Jerry sees the fate of what's coming for his wife on Carl's face, and he begs Carl. He's like, please don't hurt my wife. Please don't hurt my wife. Well, about that time, he ends up going to shoot. Carl ends up shooting Jerry, and I don't know if, you know, how many shots were in before he actually died, but Jerry was shot 4 times. And then Carl goes to the opposite side of the trailer to where Ned and Wayne are. And Wayne had tried to kill Ned, but was not successful. And in this process, Carl realized that Ned was still alive. He was still actually trying to fight for his life. He was not going out without a bang. Like, he was like, you know, you're not taking me out easily. So Carl decides to help Wayne out, and Carl then also shoots him. It is noted that from the autopsy that Ned was shot 6 times. So he was shot 6 times. Both of Ned and Jerry are now dead. Well, after that, they realized that, you know, Mary's coming, so Carl wants to hang around. He's like, we're going to just hang out, see what happens. We'll wait for Mary to get here. So after they're sitting there for a little while, so then after Carl is told about Mary coming, they're chilling, all right? They're just hanging out, waiting. Well, they hear a tractor pull up, and it's Jimmy Alday. Well, Jimmy Alday has no clue what's going on inside. He doesn't know that his dad and his brother are both dead inside the mobile home. And so Jimmy goes to knock on the door. He's just got off the tractor, goes to knock on the door. And as soon as the door's open, there's standing Wayne. And Wayne's got a pistol, and he is pointing it at Jimmy. And he says, he tells Jimmy to come inside. So Jimmy obliges. He comes inside. They tell him to empty his pockets just like they did the other men. He empties his pockets, and he's telling them, you know, please don't hurt me, whatever. He's just, you know, basically begging for his life. And at that time, they tell Jimmy to lay down on the sofa. So the living room is here, the kitchen's here, and then you have both bedrooms on each side. So Jimmy lays down on the sofa, and he is shot 2 times and killed. You know, so now you have a body in just about every room of the home. And he was shot by Carl. So, you know, Carl is the one that's done most of the killing at this point. Well, then as they're sitting there waiting still, poor Mary pulls up. She's been to the store. She's got a bag of groceries. She goes to walk in the house, and she also is met with a gun. Carl snuck up actually behind her as she was coming into the house and pushed her inside with the gun, you know, in his hand. And, you know, they really just were mocking her and picking at her and laughing at her, and she was frightened. And they just used her fear to, it just turned them on, and they were enjoying seeing this woman just in agony. And so they ended up knocking the groceries out of her hand, and, you know, were just laughing at her. And she's crying. She's hysterical. Well, right about that time, they hear another vehicle pull up in the yard. And so Carl tells George, he's like, take her to the bathroom and just keep her there until we deal with whoever this is that has pulled up. So George takes Mary to the bathroom, and they see the other two men, which is Chester and his uncle Alday. Now, Alday was Ned's brother. He was the uncle to Jimmy, Jerry, and Chester. So they end up, same thing, they are met at gunpoint. They're brought into the mobile home as well. Now, at this time, they can see that there is a dead body on the couch. It is Jimmy. And they're obviously shaken. They know what's coming. They're made to empty their pockets out as well. And, you know, once they got inside and they saw all of this, they decided to split the two guys up the same way as they had Ned and Jerry. So Alday was taken to the south bedroom where Jerry's body was, and he also was pleading for his life. While he was pleading for his life, I was trying to remember. So while he was pleading for his life, it is said that Carl shot him, and later, whenever the crime scene was looked at, they actually found where Alday was holding his nephew's hand, Jerry. He was holding Jerry's hand in his final moments, because that's how he was found. Like, their hands were entwined together, and they, you know, he died holding his nephew's hand, which is heartbreaking. That's so sad. But, you know, just senseless, just absolutely senseless. So while Alday was in the south bedroom, Chester was taken to the north bedroom where his dad, Ned, was laying there dead on the floor. And he was shot and killed by Wayne, where Carl had killed Uncle Alday. Well, Mary was still alive and alert for all this, y'all. Like, she still heard everything happening. She heard the gunshots. I'm sure she heard the pleading. And I can't even imagine the fear and the pain that she was going through. Like, there's just, I don't even want to imagine it. Like, this poor, poor woman. After they killed Chester and Uncle Alday, though, they decided to move on to Mary. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I know I put a disclaimer at the very beginning, but listen, y'all, disclaimer, I'm about to talk about some really deep stuff, and if you're triggered, now's the time to back out. So they get Mary out of the bathroom where George had been watching her, and they undress her. They put her on the kitchen table, and Carl goes on to rape her, and then Wayne rapes her. You know, they basically just took turns raping her. And they ended up blindfolding her and gagging her, and they put her in her car, and they drive to a wooded lot that's close by, where they take her out of the car. They actually pull her out of the car by her hair. And she is then raped again. She was raped by Carl twice, it said, and then by, I just lost my earring or something. Oh, that was my bobby pin, y'all. I lost my bobby pin. So she was actually dragged out of the car by her hair, and just horrifically, she's raped again twice by Carl, and then again by Wayne. No, I'm sorry, not by Wayne at that time. She was then raped by George. So this was the first time that George had actually partake in that whole horrific, they're disgusting. They're just disgusting. They don't even deserve to live. They actually told Mary, and this was even more horrific. They told Mary that she was going to be able to live, that they were going to let her go. So here she has this false sense of hope in her mind, and they pull out a camera. It was a camera that they had stolen from the house. It was like a Polaroid camera where it spits out the images, and they take pictures of her begging for her life. Just, you know, she's frightened. She's got tears coming down her face. Like, it's just horrific. The picture was actually later found at a later time. I don't know how it was found, or if they just left it at the crime scene. I'm not really sure, but it was later found, and it said that she just looked completely terrified and frightened for her life. So they tell her they're going to let her go. They say, we're going to actually let you go, but we want you to get on your stomach and lay on the ground. So she does so, and I don't know how long they sat there and messed with her, but in that process, but they ended up shooting her twice, once in the back of the head and again at the back of the neck, right where the top of the back is. So she was killed and she was left there completely nude, you know, just thrown out like trash. It's just so sad. So absolutely sad. And then at that moment, they decided they needed to flee. I mean, they had to get out of Dodge, right? So they decide to take Mary's car because they're super smart criminals. They take Mary's car and they later abandon it in Alabama, I do believe. And FYI, George was the one that shot and killed Mary. So that was the only murder that George actually did. The rest of them were done by Wayne and Carl. Now, within 3 days, George was the first one that was apprehended, and he was taken into custody first. He was very remorseful. He felt really bad about what he had done. I mean, obviously it doesn't change what he did. He still is a monster, but you could tell like he was visibly shaken and he felt horrible and he knew that he needed to pay for what he did. Later, Wayne was taken into custody and he wasn't remorseful at all. Wayne was actually bragging about it and just pretending like he was just proud, y'all. He was proud. It was disgusting. Billy and Carl were taken in pretty much around the same time. I think they might have been together when they were taken in. And Billy was just in this state of just disarray. Like, he's like, listen, I witnessed some horrific things. He didn't partake in any of it, but he was there to witness. And he was actually the prosecution's key witness. And because of his testimony and because of the details that he gave, it helped the case so much that they were able to piece together what exactly happened. And where he was remorseful, Carl was not. Carl did not want to cooperate with police. He didn't feel bad for what he did. He was smug about it. In fact, whenever they asked him about the murders, Carl's response was, I don't even want to get it wrong. It was, quote, "It was a pretty May day," unquote. Yeah, it was a pretty May day was his response to the murder and killing and rape. That poor family, It was just awful. So this was the end of the road for them. Carl Isaacs was actually sentenced to death. He was executed, though, 30 years later. He sat on death row for 30 years while this poor family could not get the justice they deserved. It was awful. But finally, he was executed in 2003. Good riddance. Bye-bye. Billy Isaacs was sentenced to two 20-year sentences. He actually only served 20 years, though, and he was released. He moved down to Florida, and he died from natural causes in 2009. So, moving to George. Now, George, he was sentenced to death as well, but because of the laws and because of the way the case went down, they actually changed his sentencing to life in prison. They said there was just... the jury supposedly was swayed because it was such a big case and everybody knew about it. But, whatever. He served life in prison. He passed away in prison in 2006. So he is no longer here either. Then you have old Wayne Coleman. Good old Wayne. So Wayne was sentenced just like George was to death, but it was also overturned, and he actually got sentenced to life in prison. He is the only one that is actually still alive and well and here with us today. He is currently at Reidsville State Prison in Georgia. I hope he gets beat up really, really bad, and I hope that he has to pay for... I hope his life is horrible. I just really do, for what he put that family through. Just absolutely awful. And the Alday family, they all are together. As far as their graves, it was just a horrific scene to see all of these caskets all together. And they were laid side by side at Spring Creek Cemetery. It's a part of the Spring Creek Baptist Church. And in that church was also where the funeral was, but Ned actually helped build that church, and they dedicated the church to Ned and his family. There's a plaque. I'm gonna try to post a picture of it right here so that you guys can see it. But they were very involved in this church, and it was a very special place for all of them. And so they, like I said, they were involved in teaching. They were officials in the church, the whole family. So very, very sad. Ernestine, she actually she lived for a while. I can't remember what date she actually passed away, but I saw this picture and it was just heartbreaking. So I'm going to show you guys this picture. This is her holding a picture of her family that was massacred. And, you know, I can't imagine what kind of pain that she had to live in knowing what happened to her family and her, you know, daughter-in-law. It's just awful. But anyways, I hope you guys, you know, got a lot from this case and that I was able to spread some awareness about it. If there's other cases you guys would like for me to look into, to do a video on, to research, and just let me know. Send me a message or comment, and I look forward to bringing you more of these kinds of cases to bring awareness to the fact that just because we're in South Georgia, there's still monsters out here. Yeah, people suck. And the justice system, sadly, is just really messed up too, because if it was up to me, I would have just... I executed all of those horrible people. I just, you know, Carl would have been the first. Yeah, after I tortured him for a while. Sickos. Anyway, hope you guys have a great day and just be safe out there. Lock your doors.